what the item is.
Hi, Greg Neitzer, Sioux Falls. I just want to preface this by saying that I've only started looking at this for about a week, and I want to talk about Article 6, specifically initiative and referendum, and I can come back in a few months with some more solidified ideas. So in 2014, we had an unprecedented amount of activity in that regard. We had 2 initiatives and 2 referendums. And when we think about what the function of those are, it provides a way for citizens to bypass their representatives and address a grievance. It's a safety valve in our form of government empowering citizens who have grievances. And as such, the elected body, as well as the government that body represents, has a conflict of interest and a vested stake in the outcome of those petitions. In late 2013, I formed a ballot question committee named Forward Zoning. We advocated for the adoption of shaped places. We actually, in that regard, so we advocated the city's position, not officially because we were an independent body, but it just so happened we were advocating for shaped places. So as a group of private citizens, we were free to advocate all we want, and we tried to do that and tried to educate the citizens. The city, however, is barred from advocating. Because of that prohibition, the city, in my opinion, should have stayed completely out of the issue, and that includes the educational presentations that they had. Whether or not it was education or advocation is something that's a serious debate. I personally attended most of those. I think the city employees did an incredible job in trying to do their best to stay objective and try to put it forward as best they could. But I think they were in a really bad position because they're not supposed to advocate. And when you take something even like the zoning ordinance, it's so large, it gets very difficult to not be perceived as advocating. For example, they might say, well, the new ordinance requires a buffer yard, while the old one does not. That's completely factual, but it could be construed as being advocation. So it was very, very difficult, I think, for them. So I think it's virtually impossible for the city to be objective, no matter how hard they try, because we're all human beings. That conflict of interest creates a clear and present danger that the information presented, and just as important, the information that's left out could be slanted or it could be subjective. Citizens, including myself, I think were perfectly able to advocate. And then in addition to that, there was the city attorney's explanation. And once again, I think they probably did their best, but I have the city attorney's explanation here, and they're quite lengthy. And they run into the same problem where there was, when you look at what's in and what's out, you can read certain things, for example, with the shaped places, where it talks about shaped places does this and the old one didn't do that. Once again, it gets really dancing very close. And I think once again, when you have the city brought forward shaped places and they adopted it, it's very hard to think that they didn't have a little bit of something going on in their minds where they were, maybe selectively editing. And that's from somebody who was advocating for it. And I'll tell you, when we saw the ballot language, all of us as a group said, we couldn't have done this better if we did it ourselves. At that point, we thought we probably had a slam dunk. And I'm not trying to attack anybody personally, but that's just how we felt. And I guess maybe the last issue is none of us saw the ballot language, as far as I know. There may have been some group, but the groups I talked to, none of us saw the ballot language until it was done. It was a done deal. So there were at least 2 groups that I know of that did pursue court action to try to because they had objections to the ballot language. And as far as I know, what they had found out was that it was too late. There was nothing they could do about it. It was already on the ballot. Well, they weren't presented the language. So I guess what I'd like you to think about is coming up with a way to explicitly prohibit the expenditure of city funds or resources in any regard when it comes to the initiative or referendum, specifically when it comes to anything that would be educational or discussing it. And obviously that wouldn't prohibit city employees from doing that as private citizens, but just not using any city time for anything that could be construed as education. Looking at number 2 would be the ballot language. I'm still trying to review what state law requires, but making the ballot language as essentially succinct as possible. A vote yes is this, and a vote no is this. Period. End of issue. I think that might be all that's required, not necessarily this large text. Now, what the city clerk could do would be to come up with essentially, like we see at the state level, like sort of a ballot, a guide where my side could write what we thought, the pro side, and then there could be the con side, and then the con side can put their thing out too. And trying to be completely objective, I don't think the other side had a fair chance when I read that language. I think it helped us, but it didn't help them. It wasn't really fair to them. And then I think the last thing is a requirement that maybe the entire public, but at the very least ballot question committees, all get a chance to review the ballot language before it's solidified 10 days, or I'm not an attorney, I don't know exactly what that would be, but something in which there's a remedy so that they can, if they have a gripe with it, they can approach the city, and even if they want to take legal action, they can do so, just so everybody's due process is preserved. So I'm going to come up with more solid ideas hopefully in the next few months, but that's what I had so far. Thank you.
That will be on the agenda in the November meeting.
Okay, thank you.